let people decide whether or not that role is right for them. So the best thing that you can do is paint the picture of what they'll be doing. Posting a selfie or just letting people know how your day is going, right? Like, you don't have to overthink it. You don't have to write a LinkedIn article to be using LinkedIn.
The number one thing, like the first question I want people to ask on our team is, how are you doing? Like, how is it going? Like, because people have had it hard for the last couple of years. And if you're not connecting with them at all and you're just like, it's a pull, that's out of our process. We got to follow a process. And that's really going to put us in a bad situation because of security or all these other things, instead of just saying, you know what, it's the right thing to do. Just do it.
We are here with Chris Brady, Director of Talent Acquisition at Sage for North America, and Laryssa Martinovich, Talent Acquisition Content Specialist at Sage. Sage is a market leader for integrated accounting, payroll, and payment systems. The company's doing an amazing job with how they go about talent acquisition and educating their leaders on hiring and company culture. And I'm super excited to have Chris and Laryssa on with us today. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Lisa.
So could you guys start by telling me a little bit more about Sage and both your separate roles within the talent acquisition team?
Sage is a large global company. As you mentioned, we specialize in software service. Our employees and our culture is a little bit different than you'll find at any other company, which again is what every company says. But until you're living it, you really start to understand the actions put in place to make a change in the world. So my role at Sage is talent acquisition content specialist. And basically what that means is I create content that helps candidates know what it's like to actually work at the company. So storytelling of the role in the company in a very human sounding tone.
Yeah, so I lead our talent acquisition for North America, so mostly US and Canada, but then I also have a remit specifically around our Sage Intact business, which is all over the place, right? So we have India, Romania, we also have pieces of Europe, and then also Israel. And I think one of the things that I find so interesting is that when I started, you take a job and you're like, okay, what is this really like? Because you don't really know until you ask. I read books about it. What should I do in the first 90 days? Who should I talk to? And I think the interesting thing that I found out when doing a little research was that our outside brand, at least in North America, was not 100% aligned to what I knew Sage to be the more I learned. So I was like, oh, this is weird. Most companies are the opposite of that. They say all these great things online, and then you go in there and you're like, wait a sec, I'm not sure they're reading their handbook because it says we're a nice company, right? And then somebody's, telling you to go blank yourself, and you're like, wait a sec, what is, I don't understand. So, and I've been in recruiting since the mid 90s, so I'm definitely an older man, I would say. But I think from my experience, I've led a recruiting agency, started one, had my own for 14 years, done a ton of executive search, and spent a lot of time on site at clients and then also on the outside. So I think, one of the things that we've done that I feel like is such a special thing is we use the whole Great Resignation to really decide, what do we want to be when we grow up from a talent acquisition standpoint? Most of the times when you take a job, at least at my level, you can't pick and choose who's on the team. So you got to come in and go, okay, let's look at the KPIs. Let's look at all the data and go, okay, who's good and who might need some help? And do we coach them? How do we help them to get up to speed? Where we kind of had, it was like a hurricane coming through when I started last year in June, and we had tons of attrition. And a lot of that was industry. It wasn't just Sage, but But the one thing that I was looking at going, hey, you know what? I can look at this as a problem, the world's on fire, or I can see it as an opportunity. And we really focused on the opportunity piece. And, and speaking of Laryssa, so one of the people that came on board pretty quickly after I started was Molly Sly, that is a talent acquisition manager on our team. And she was like, you know what? Like, we can fix a lot of the things, but the one thing that we really need some external help with is the branding piece, rewriting the job descriptions, the content, because our job descriptions were super robotic, like most. And that was one of the first things that I was like, hey, you know what? We're going to take a actual recruiter headcount and we're going to hire somebody that can change this. And Laryssa's been like complete, total changeover. It's like we should do a makeover of your TA team and have it starring Laryssa. Because like compared to when I started to what we're at now, like we have people actually applying to our jobs and saying that job description just resonated with me so much. Like it was so human. It wasn't like we are looking for more robots with 5 years of this, 3 years of this. And every time you talk to a hiring manager, they give you this list. Like it's like ordering a car and they want every possible thing that you could think of, right? And you're like, okay, let's kind of look at reality here and look at the data and the marketplace and all those things. But that's one of the things I think that for where we are now, I've been here a year and I'm just so super excited about, okay, now we got all the right people. Now we're doing all these cool things. What's the next step? So, but anyway, sorry for the long intro.
I love the long intro. So actually, that kind of leads me to my next point. So from your years in talent acquisitions, what values or techniques have you found to be timeless, and what do you think are shifting?
So the thing that is interesting, so if we look at the SAGE values of human, bold, simplify, and trust, like doing the right thing, I've always just felt like, you know what? If I can be human and be transparent and a lot of times when you work at companies, leaders they keep everything to themselves. They don't share like, hey, these are some things that I'm not good at. And I try to do the opposite of that because I just feel like if I work at a company, I want somebody I can trust, right? That's real. That's not like the first thing I did was say, look, our applicant tracking system kind of sucks. Like, can I be honest with you? And when you talk about whatever it is, and people start to gain trust and they trust you and they will go with you into whatever battle it is. But if you're always judging and then always like, oh, look at me, here's me. And Laryssa can talk a little about that because I've just like, I invited her on the last minute to this. I do that a lot with her. So she's either thinking this guy's crazy or, but I think one of the things is you also look at the talent you have and you know who on your team setting those expectations. But I would say the human thing, ask anybody, they will tell you, I'm going to tell you what I think. And it might be not right, but I'll also kind of let people know that.
One thing before Laryssa jumps in there, one thing I love about Laryssa's job is the fact, like just speaking to this idea that this one post fits all recruitment method really no longer works. So that mix of being able to create a job post that's really gaining attention, but then also what is the human-centric content around it that's drawing people to really get a feel for the culture without the boldness that feels fake, but the boldness that is superhuman. So
yeah, I mean, 100%. If you are trying to recruit for a customer service representative and a principal software engineer, you can't say the same things to them because they're looking for different things. On top of that, like, let people decide whether or not that role is right for them. So the best thing that you can do is paint the picture of what they'll be doing, right? So like, what's the team look like? What's their long-term priorities? What's their first 90 days look like? What what type of tools will they have to be successful? Is it going to be a very high visibility role? Like, let them decide, and they'll not only apply if it appeals to them, but also be a qualified candidate and stay with the company longer. So, as I write these job postings, I'm not sugarcoating them. I'm not trying to make the company seem like something that it's not. I wouldn't want that if I were in their shoes. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just been a really neat opportunity working for Sage. Like, when they first brought me on, they showed me this whole world of potential. Like, here's everything that you can do. What do you want to start with? So it's been awesome.
And I think one of the things too that you find in the talent acquisition space is that you've got these large brands, well-known brands, and most of the time when you go to conferences, they're the ones that are teaching, and it's kind of a joke. Like, you're Tesla. People know who you are. They're not like, oh, what do they do? What does Facebook do? Ooh, I don't know. That sounds exciting. Like, there's no selling. There's no so I've always worked at other organizations that maybe they weren't as well known, but I think that's part of the fun of it. Because when you have that conversation with candidates and you kind of tell them, hey, did you know this? Or hey, did you know that? And the other piece of that human piece is that we really want that across our whole team. We want a candidate to walk away from a conversation and go, man, that was different. That was so different. They didn't just, hey, what do you know about Sage? Let me tell you how great Sage is. Oh, by the way, have you seen Sage's new buildings? Like, be normal. Like, and I feel like the last couple of years with the pandemic, that piece of it, the number one thing, like the first question I want people to ask on our team is, how are you doing? Like, how is it going? Like, because people have had it hard for the last couple of years. And if you're not connecting with them at all, and you're just like, it's a pull, it's a, let me ask and let me get. And the more you go away from that, you start to really kind of build your network where people reach out to you and say, hey, you reached out to me. That wasn't the right opportunity, but guess what? I know somebody. Because they were thinking about you because you made them feel special. And it wasn't just this, here comes the car salesman recruiter, and that's what they're expecting. And I think that resonates across all touch points. So same thing with messaging candidates. I don't care if we put in our subject line, free hot dogs. Like, whatever they will respond to is what we should do. I mean, obviously it has to be appropriate, but you get on a LinkedIn call and they're telling you about, oh, this is a strategy you should use. Maybe, but it doesn't always work that way. And when you're sending you're sending 50 messages a day, sometimes it's just have some fun with it. Like, I don't know, like, and I think that will help not only whatever organization it is, but then the candidates too. And it's the same thing with calling somebody up and saying, hey, Lisa, you were the finalist candidate in the interview, but you didn't get the job. And telling them why, and actually helping them in their career, and not just being a black hole or ghosting them where they never hear back from you. And they're like, what do they think about Sage? It's just like going and eating somewhere and the salmon smelled a little like fish. Most people now are going to go onto Yelp and complain and tattletale, right? Like, yeah. Or I'm just like,
absolutely.
So anyways.
So Sage just had their leadership conference, and Chris, you taught a masterclass there called How Great Leaders Attract Talent. Between the two of you, could you give us your top 5 pieces of advice on this topic?
Well, it's funny because when I was asked with 2 other people to present on it, the first person I reached out to was Laryssa. Like, hey. and so I was asking her like, because, a lot of times when you're presenting, you really want to put yourself in the shoes of the person sitting in the seat going, what do they want from it? What can they take away from it? And that was one of the things. I like memes. I like it to be like exciting. If I can't sit through it and like, I have ADD, I have an issue focusing most of the time. I'm sure you can't tell that at all from our conversation. But I think that was one of the things that Laryssa and I talked about was I want them to walk away with something that they'll actually can deliver. They can do something about. And the funniest thing about this, so our what we taught about was specifically around how great leaders can attract talent and how they can actually do something. And I was involved in the hiring of our new DEI director, Greg Nance, in North America. And Amy Cosgrove, that I work for, is the VP of People. She put a LinkedIn post, and Steve Hare, our CEO, actually commented on it and said, "Welcome, super excited," right? Well, that's exactly what we were teaching about, and he was in one of the classes. So I thought it was amazing that, connecting the dots. But Laryssa, you obviously helped a bunch on that as far as helping me put together, some of the content.
Yeah. So one of my pet peeves when I join a webinar or I read an article is the ideas and the action items are so big and so dreamy that you can't put anything into play. So I'm like, they're going to get loaded with information. Let's just give them some very, very simple action items that they can start doing right now. So I'm happy that Chris came to me because I'm the person who is in the weeds with this stuff, right? And I think it goes to show what type of company Sage is, right? Leaders aren't just guessing and presenting. They're actually going to the subject matter experts, or they're trying to get insight from other people on the team. So I was really happy to help with this. I thought he was going to invite me to France when he first started talking about it. I was like, oh. But anyway, so really being human, simple, bold, creating trust. It can be as simple as, like Chris said, commenting on employees' posts, engaging with them, right? Posting a selfie, or just letting people know how your day is going, right? You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to write a LinkedIn article to be using LinkedIn. So we gave them some very, very simple action items that they could pick up their phone and start doing right away.
And I think one of the things you mentioned was that that Laryssa put in one of the slides was that the number one obstacle that candidates face is not knowing what it's like to work at an organization. Mm-hmm. And so the way to do that is for leaders to engage, and they really see, oh, okay, they actually are human, right? They actually are doing something. Because in this world, and I don't know if you've seen Laryssa's profile, but I think it says scroll stopper next to your name. And that's what we're trying to do, right? Because everybody's going through that feed. Sometimes it's kind of blurry now. Or am I on LinkedIn? Am I on Facebook? Am I on TikTok? Sometimes you don't know because it's all these different things that may not be the most business minded. So we're trying to stick out and get them to stop and go, ooh, what's that about? What's that like? So
one of the things that I love that you guys mentioned is just giving those simple action items, because I think especially during the Great Resignation, we have so many of these headlines of these big, bold things to start doing that I feel like nobody knows where to start. So I like those small pieces of advice. And even to kind of lead me into my next question, on the LinkedIn company page for Sage, you guys have videos posted from people all over the organization, just small bits, just to get that human element across. To my next question, how does company culture impact candidate retention? When does this topic of culture need to be brought up during the hiring process? And what aspects of the culture are important to emphasize?
Well, great question, because I think culture is widely overused when it comes to trying to attract talent. Every intake meeting that I'm on with hiring managers, I ask them, why someone should join their team. And they always say, well, because we're awesome and we have great culture. Okay, well, that doesn't really tell me the story of it. Like, everyone is a great company and a great team and has a great culture and work-life balance. Like, this is buzzword bingo, right? As we're calling it. So on my job postings, I will sometimes say culture does not equal virtual happy hours. Culture at Sage means programs for work-life balance, diverse leadership, paid time off to volunteer, right? Actual hard fact culture items. So I think a lot of the times companies think that they should win an award for throwing a pizza party for their company. And unfortunately, they'll write themselves as having an awesome culture because of it. So I try to just avoid the whole word culture and any of those other buzzwords, because candidates aren't even seeing them anymore. They don't trust them. They're way overused. They've been burned far too many times with them. So I paint the picture more of what that specific team does. Because Sage is such a huge company, right? Like, the culture within the sales department might be a little bit different than the culture within the product marketing department.
I think the other thing too, when we were at that leadership conference, one of the person that runs kind of our customer operations and our customer success, they actually shared all these pain stories of things that were not doing well. And I felt like that was such a different thing. You get your top 200 leaders in a room. Normally it's rah, rah, rah. We're so awesome. You're so awesome. But it was a different feel. And people are like, we need to do better at these things. How do we do them? And, and they also they did have a success story, but it wasn't based on how great Sage is. It was the fact that we had a partner. So part of our partner and alliances, that their building actually burned down over a weekend. And the owner of this small organization was reaching out. Actually, the account person found out about it, reached out to the EVP at Sage and said, hey, we should probably do something, and reached out to the owner. And they're like, I don't even know. They're like, the only thing that we want to do right now is be able to pay our employees. And we can't do that because everything burned, including our computers. So within 2 days, we had 2 laptops to them so that they could do their payroll. And we didn't ask them for anything. We just did it, right? And I think that's a good example of the human piece of cutting through because a lot of organizations go, well, that's out of our process. We got to follow a process. And that's really going to put us in a bad situation because of security or all these other things, instead of just saying, you know what, it's the right thing to do. Just do it. And I think that's one thing that we try to shine through. But, we're a large organization. We're over 10,000 employees. So does every group work like that? I don't think so. I'm just being honest with you. But the more that we try to influence and have conversations with leaders, whether it's on diversity, whether it's on org structure, because the biggest thing, I think in the last 2 years with the Great Resignation was a lot of, you have people leaving, and then hiring managers are just automatically thinking, I need to backfill that same exact job. And they're thinking of that same exact person. And it's like, do we really need that? Have you thought about it? And that's where I think Laryssa comes in a lot of the time. And then, obviously our other leaders on my team and recruiters to say, well, yeah, the person left that was a senior developer, but do you need that? What's the best fit for your team and where you're moving forward? Because we've kind of been doing this big, I'd say, innovation push to focus all of our products and more so aligning where the industry is going and being more on the subscription-based, SaaS-based model. And so that's been an interesting thing because, not every organization is aligned to there's the short term, we got to meet our numbers so we can pay our bills and pay our employees. But the long term is, are we building something that matters? And that's where I think sometimes it gets a little foggy, for sure, especially at large orgs.
Absolutely. To your point, Chris, I think there was such a scramble for so many companies to figure out what do we do to fix the Band-Aid right now of losing candidates or losing employees, and then how do we create a long game to create a brand, an employer brand that people really want to be a part of. Now, Sage has over 10,000 employees globally. What does the company do to bring together employees, help them feel connected, avoid that feeling of feeling like a small fish in a big ocean?
I think from my standpoint, I'd say Sage Foundation is a big piece of what we do. And we're actually going to be merging eventually Sage Foundation with our sustainability efforts as well. But pretty much Sage Foundation is our commitment to the communities. How do we give back? What do we do? And so each employee has kind of a goal for them to spend 5 days doing something that matters, whatever that is. And that when I first started, because we were still in like lockdown pandemic phase, one of the things that we did amongst our team is we did something with the Atlanta Community Food Bank where we were actually went somewhere, had our masks on, and we were packing meals for people that don't have food. And so I thought it was a really good way to do a team bonding thing. But I think, it's so much bigger than that. And there's so many opportunities. I know I saw pictures online with Molly's team that Laryssa's currently on, with all of them picking up trash. And a lot of them are like work in different locations. So it was really cool to see somebody at the beach. Laryssa, I don't know, where were you? Were you somewhere in the woods picking trash up?
Yeah. So I was actually on my favorite running route near my house, I guess you could say. I had recently noticed some mini New Amsterdam bottles scattered in the woods. And I was like, oh, maybe I should pick those up during my Sage Foundation volunteer day. And so I figured, this might take 20 minutes and then I'll continue up the road and pick up some more trash. I found over, I don't even know, probably like 1,000 tiny little New Amsterdam bottles in the same space. And I felt so good knowing that like the company just paid me to do this and I helped in such a huge way. Like these bottles happened to be near a creek, right? They would have all ended up in the water. No one was picking them up, clearly, because I ran past them every day and they were there. So it was a neat opportunity for sure.
So last question for you guys. At Solvable, we're all about what drives purpose and meaning for people at work. So I'd love to know what drives purpose and meaning for you both at Sage.
I can go first. So for me, really, I'm really big in trying to get people on their journey of where they need to go, right? Or where they want to go. And so, a lot of what I do, there's the coaching and other things around the business piece, the recruiting piece, the leadership piece, other things. But I think at the end of the day, for me, your life there's a lot of other pieces outside of work. And so I really kind of focus on that, that's my goal. And at the end of the day, I want people to feel like, we care about them. We're doing the right thing. We're trying to help them on their journey, whatever it is. Could be personal stuff, could be business stuff, could be whatever. But I think for me, that's kind of like my mission in life is I want to make sure that I'm doing something that matters and it's not just all about me.
I think it's different for everyone. So for me, like my goals and ambitions are going to be changing as I change. And if I'm not being heard and if I'm being overlooked, I'm not going to have the opportunity to pursue those. So what drives the purpose and the meaning for me at work is going to continue to change and evolve. But I know that if my leaders trust me, I'm going to be able to pursue those things. And I've totally gotten that at Sage. I'm very grateful for it.
Laryssa and Chris, thank you both so much for being on today. And thank you all for listening to Architects of Contemporary Hiring.